What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Arkansas ready to strap on the pads this week. They'll practice 4 times this week. We'll have availability Monday, Tuesday, I believe some on Wednesday, maybe Friday. I can't remember. I've got the schedule. We'll go over that in a minute. But they will strap on pads Tuesday, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to get into some things with this offense, wide receivers. We'll talk special teams. Curtis Wilkerson is also going to join us to talk a little bit about football, and we'll chime in on some basketball as well. All that and more on Hog Sports Live. Before we get started, of course, I want to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live, where we're streaming live. Be sure to follow the page if you haven't done so already. Again, we're almost at 80,000 follows, which we want to be before football season starts. So be sure to interact with the video and follow the page. Also available on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content on YouTube. Interact with the video there. Subscribe to the page. Hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Also available on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to have a nice review from you and a 5-star, don't do a 4-star, 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Also available Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. And what are you doing? If you're not subscribed to Hog Sports right now, it's 50% off the regular rate. This is a fantastic deal. We're about to dive right into football season. We've got plenty of recruiting stuff from Danny West, our VIP man. But it just breaks down to like 15 cents a day, $1.03 a week, $4.48 a month for your number one insider source on Razorback sports and recruiting. There's no promo code or anything. You just go to the site and sign up. We promise you'll be pleased that you did. We are the number one largest Razorback team affiliated site. All right, now we got that out of the way. Sign up if you haven't done so already. I'll remind you at the end. You could also sign up for $1, which is a pretty good deal too. Sign up for $1 for your first month. And the good thing about the $1 option is if you decide you like it, once you're off that promo, you're paying regular price, you're eligible for CBS All Access, which is commercial free. You can, watch all the games, you can watch all of their shows, movies, all that stuff for absolutely free. And that's a $99 annual value that you get for as long as you're subscribed to Hog Sports. So it doesn't just stop. So if you're subscribed for 10 years, and you get 10 years free of CBS All Access. So pretty good deal there. Okay. Arkansas is finally going to run an actual real-life up-tempo offense, believe it or not. You've been promised for years. You've been promised this going back to 2006 with Gus Malzahn. You didn't really run it then. I mean, going back to Chad Morris's time when he said Arkansas is going to be one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. They were one of the least. Hey, calm down. I got a special guest with me today. This is Jerry Jack. My daughter named him. He's in here with me. He was asleep. Hey, buddy. He's 9 weeks old. Anyway, calm down. If you hear any chirping, that's him. Everybody's out of the house. School starts today. So I'm stuck with the dog. So anyway, going back to this, it was interesting because I asked Chad after the Western Kentucky game, right before he was fired, about that, saying that they're going to be one of the more explosive offenses in all college football. And what he said was, I'm not going to read his exact quote, but basically he said, we don't want to go out there and play to a speed in which we're going 3 and out, putting our defense back on the fields. So there's been some adjustment to that. Okay, that's what he said. Now, if you go back and look, Arkansas had the worst third down conversion rate of any team in the SEC the past 2 seasons at 32.1%. The second fewest first downs at 219 per season. So he backed off his left lane hammer down motto, so the offense would be on the field longer for its 3 and out, because you didn't want to get the defense out there too quick. So make sure you use all 40 seconds of the play clock. So you have to adjust your personnel, obviously, and Arkansas will go 3 and out this season. But you have to stick to your guns. You have to stick to what you believe in. Mike Woods has said they're going very fast. We have not seen them get lined up in team. I'm hoping that'll happen at some point, but we haven't seen them line up in team yet. But he said they're going really fast. I just think that's interesting when you compare what Chad said to the results. They didn't want to put the defense out on the field too quickly. They're the worst third down conversion team in the. If it's not working, then it's not working. It just shows that he was just kind of out of touch with everything. Always said they had 30% of the offense installed. Browse has said they already have 75% of the offense. These offenses are not that complicated. Spread offenses are not as complicated as like a pro style typically. It's just about getting, comfortable in that system, getting the rhythm down. Curtis Wilkerson, who's going to be joining us later, had an interesting story about the self-starting Hogs establishing a new culture. Now, somebody on Drive Time kind of questioned this a little bit, wondered, why are they leaving it up to the players? And I get that angle, but you really do want to lead from within your program. You want your players to take accountability for the program. They're going to be out on the field alone. The coaches aren't going to be out there with them, so you need that leadership. I will say this, one of the problems I think that happened with Brett Bielema in 2016, the end of the year there, I think he thought he had a little bit more leadership within the program than he actually had, leaving it up to the players a little bit too much. And I think that's kind of why you saw them nosedive towards the end of 2016. And then, of course, 2017, a lot changed. So, but you still have to encourage and develop that leadership, that inner strength to not be a quitter. Anybody got that one? Anybody name that song? So, Arkansas's quarterback competition is ongoing. Felipe Franks has an edge, a notable edge. Hey, chew something else. Chew this. Sorry, people. This is real life, live television. So, Felipe Franks has an edge, obviously, but everybody's going to get their opportunity. KJ Jefferson, John Stephen Jones, Jack Lindsey, Malik Hornsby. I would say Felipe, KJ, Malik are probably your most talented guys, the guys that you would maybe be a little more invested in. But it's KJ's job to lose. When you go back and look at his numbers, 4,420 career passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, which is almost in the top 10 of returning quarterbacks. 13-3 starter in his last 1.2 seasons before he was lost in the Kentucky game in the third quarter with a dislocated ankle, and Kyle Trask took over, led Florida to 11 wins. The rest is history. They stick with Trask moving forward, and Franks decides to transfer out. Now, KJ Jefferson was also very highly regarded. This is a guy that came to Arkansas with a hitch in his throwing motion. He's corrected that. It did fly on him a little bit at times last year, but the number 12 dual-threat quarterback prospect in the country in 2019. And then Hornsby was the number 8 dual-threat quarterback in the nation in 2020. So from a recruit ranking standpoint, Arkansas has never had this many 4-stars, this many highly rated quarterbacks on campus at the exact same time. They've come close, but they haven't had this many. I still think that there's opportunities for a guy like KJ, maybe Malik too. I mean, heck, all these guys can play this year and not lose a year of eligibility. You could, in theory, have Felipe Franks on campus 3 years. This season, which doesn't count against eligibility, I don't know how they would work that, though, in terms of giving him a 6 year of eligibility, because he would have this year, he would already have the next year, and this year again. I mean, you could literally give him three years of eligibility. You could play Malik Hornsby as much as you want. You don't have to limit anybody to 4 games to redshirt him, because they have approved that. They have approved that this season will not count against your eligibility. I don't necessarily agree with that. We talked about that in the last show. You can go back and listen to that. I mean, in some cases, I understand, you're giving the player the assurance that, hey, you're going to be okay. You're going to get this year back. If something happens, you're going to get the year back. Don't worry about it. So I get that aspect of it. But at the same time, how do you balance it out? I know next year the roster, it's not going to, the people that would have graduated that are coming back, that's not going to count against you next year. But what about the year after that? I mean, is it going to be like a paring down process? I mean, it's going to impact high school recruits. There's not going to be as many high school kids that sign Division I scholarships, FBS scholarships. I guess it's just FBS level. It's competition heating up at wide receiver, not with the starting groups. It's going to be Traylon Burks, Trey Knox, and Mike Woods. I don't think nobody's questioning that it's going to be those three guys. The question is who comes in behind them. Now, Kendall Briles has pretty much said it's going to be about 5 wide receivers that play. If everybody stays healthy in an ideal situation, 5 wide receivers that'll play. Some coaches have 6. Some coaches travel 6 or 7 wide receivers, but 5 will play. And then you're looking to Kendall Catalon, Devion Warren, Tyson Morris, Shamar Nash possibly. There's a few candidates. T.J. Hammonds has moved over there also. So there's a few candidates to come in and help them, but it does feel like that there's a bit of a separation. Coylin Jackson's another one. Darren Turner, the freshman, 4-star freshman. So it'll be interesting to see what develops there. But those 3 guys, they're going to play 5, but the 3 starters are going to play a large majority, according to Kendall Briles. I've got a long breakdown on Arkansas special teams. It's a VIP story, but I'm going to touch on just a few things here. Going back to Georgia with Scott Fountain, the numbers that they put up there, really impressive, really all the way around. And I think the big thing is that there wasn't just a lot of disaster plays. They were second in the SEC with just 1 kickoff allowed over 30 yards and limited opponents to 18 yards per kickoff return. Arkansas, Sam Lloyd got a lot of flack. He'll have competition with George Caratan, the transfer out of Michigan, who didn't play for Michigan last year, or didn't play, but he was with Michigan. But Sam Lloyd caught a lot of flack last year because his punts were rather short overall. Okay, near the bottom, second to last in 2018, and then they were last year, even though they averaged more per punt. But the balance is they ranked first in the SEC, tied for first in fewest returns allowed. And also, when they were returned, I think they were second in the SEC with 4.5 yards per return. So what people didn't see with Lloyd is he was getting really good hang time. And, he was booming. He can boom a punt. His punts got so high, and I don't think that translated to TV very well for people. But what he's got to do is he's got to get the angle a little bit different, But he wasn't a bad punter for Arkansas. It's just he was a little too vertical, I think, at times. But he'll have some competition. Traylon Burks, probably the favorite to return, 6'3", 233, punt returner and kickoff returner. Last year it wasn't like a disaster like it was the year before. The first half of 2018 was a complete and utter disaster. I went over the Auburn game last episode, just how bad special teams killed them. Last year they didn't have any punt blocks. The one, eyesore for Barry Lundy, who took over special teams, and credit to him because they were better. But when Keegan Brewer from North Texas caught the ball and kind of acted like he made a fair catch, didn't make any sign, and then went 90 yards for a touchdown. That was in 2018, excuse me. Last year, you had the fake punt against Auburn with the chest pass. That was the embarrassment for last year. So that was the eyesore for last year. 2018 was a total disaster, the first half of the season. And it eventually morphed into a unit that didn't hurt Arkansas, but didn't help them at all. Last year, I'm not sure that they got a lot of help, but they pretty much throughout most of the year didn't hurt themselves too badly, except for that one play against Auburn. Arkansas didn't allow a single punt return over 20 yards last year. Kicking, now they've got A.J. Reed coming in, Duke transfer, who was like 83.3%, 19 of 23 last year on field goals. Connor Limpert was a good field goal kicker for Arkansas. All field goal kickers, if they miss, they catch some flack. But he was actually really accurate in the history books in terms of Arkansas, and it actually was a little bit better than A.J. Reed as far as kickoffs. AJ averaged 59.5 yards per kickoff, 15 touchbacks on 57 kicks, while Limpert averaged 60 with 28 touchbacks on 54 kicks. So Limpert was actually a little bit better, but Reed might be a little bit more consistent as a field goal kicker. Speaking of Duke, Duke has said they're not going to have fans, at least for the first part of their 2020 football season, fall sports period. They're not going to have fans. I don't know why that's. I don't know why would you would do that? When you can clearly, I mean, other colleges are showing that you can do. I mean, what's different about going to an outdoor stadium venue and wearing a mask and practicing social distancing? What's different than that and going to a restaurant? I don't see why the need to shut that part of it down. I don't know that it's like going to be unsafe for the student athletes to have fans in the stands outside wearing masks, practicing social distancing. But that's what they're doing. That doesn't mean throughout the whole season that they're going to do that, but that's what they're doing now. Still better than what the Pac-12 and Big Ten are doing and canceling football. Nebraska has furloughed 51 employees in the athletic department. And then a report from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on the University of Arkansas. So administrators, coaches, people making a lot of money are getting a 15% dock in pay. I think that amounts to something like $200,000 something for Sam Pittman that he won't get this year over the next, I think, 10 months. And then people making like $100,000 or more are taking a 10%, and then it goes down. I don't have the article in front of me, but the Democrat Gazette reported that. And then I think like on the lower end of the pay scale, it's like a 7.5%. So they're going to save like $3 million by doing that. That's something that you're seeing throughout college football. It's good to see that they're not having to furlough people. But, guys, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, there's going to be some disastrous results from not playing football. We get to the fall, it's not quite going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. Or, excuse me, the spring. I mean, you're not going to play as many games in the spring, most likely. You may not even have a season. I don't know. You may not have a season. It's going to be such. I mean, you're talking about all sports piled on top of each other. I kind of think that the Big Ten says that just to soften the blow a little bit. My opinion. All right, everybody, we're going to get to Curtis Wilkerson. So for those of you who don't know Curtis, he's been with us for a couple months now, doing a really great job. Has moved down to Northwest Arkansas finally from St. Louis, where we hired him. He's originally from McCrory, and if you've been on HawgSports, then you definitely read Curtis Wilkerson stuff. He's turning out a ton of great content. Really strong basketball knowledge, which is going to be important this season.
Hey, Trey.
Hey, Curtis. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing real good. So I was just kind of telling everybody about your background again. It's been a little bit since we've had you on the show, but I guess just kind of just jumping into it. What are your thoughts so far on fall football? I know you haven't had a chance to go out there because they only allow one of us at a time. So what's been your thoughts just on what you've seen from the Zoom meetings, and we'll try to get you out there for one of the practices at some point.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the thing that jumps out to me right away, it just seems like there's an early amount of buy-in from the players, and that's something that seems really refreshing. You know, Sam Pittman, all indications are he's just a really genuine guy, trustworthy, straightforward. He's a player's coach, and I think that's refreshing for the team. So, you know, when we're doing these Zoom pressers and things like that, anytime you see one of these players get asked a question about Coach Pittman or really anybody on the staff so far, you can just feel the excitement in their voice when they're talking about him. So I would say that's the thing that stands out to me the most right away is they're going to want to play for this guy. That's something that we couldn't necessarily say this time, a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, Curtis. And you kind of got to read between the lines on that kind of stuff. But there's no question from what I hear behind the scenes, from what we see from players on social media and stuff, you just don't see that same maybe something that could be perceived as a jab or, a negative take or, I've said several times that, people that were exiting the program under Chad Morris, I heard all kinds of stuff that I chalked up to sour grapes. I screwed that up really because people were telling me, he's like, this guy's in over his head. That's what people were telling me when they were leaving the program. I haven't heard that kind of stuff with Sam Pittman, so that's been good.
Definitely.
So basketball recruiting, I know you were trying to get some basketball stuff out because you said it's about to be 99.99% football stuff. So catch us up on what's going on in recruiting in basketball.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess from an immediate standpoint, obviously we all know about the news of Isaiah Joe last week. So that did open up a roster spot, and Arkansas did make an interesting addition for this upcoming season with Brandon Kimball. So he's coming in as a graduate transfer walk-on, which is something you don't see too often, from Mississippi Valley State. Now, this isn't your typical walk-on, let's cheer you on from the end of the bench and have you come in and hopefully shoot a three in crunch time, or, well, not crunch time, but mop-up time. This guy's got some experience. When you think about a year where everything's uncertain and you never know if, all of a sudden the team might get hit with the virus or something like that, and who you're going to have on a given day, depth is really important. So to bring in a guy like Kimball, he's 6'7", 185 pounds. I mean, he averaged 5 points and 6 rebounds. And I think 6 rebounds is the key there. At Mississippi Valley State, which is a Division I school, he looked pretty good in a couple of Power 5 games. He had near double-doubles in the 2 games that he played against Division I, high major talent. So I think it'll be an interesting addition in terms of depth and the immediate future. And then looking ahead, the departure of Joe does open up a scholarship for 2021. They do have 2 commits right now, 4-star, 6'5" wing, Chance Moore. And then the JUCO addition, 6'10", Akol Mawine from Navarro Community College, Australian native. So they got those 2 guys on the hook and a couple more spots open. Things are a little quiet right now. A couple names I'd say to keep an eye on. You look at a guy like James White, top 100 recruit, 4-star wing, another Georgia native. So they're kind of getting down there into Georgia a little bit from a basketball standpoint. He's coming off a huge weekend in Atlanta. He's seen pretty frequent contact with the Razorbacks. I actually spoke with him a little bit on yesterday. And then another guy, a Memphis native, 6'6", wing, Jonathan Lawson. He named the Hogs into his top 5. I guess it was about a week ago, and he's going to be making a decision fairly soon. So that's another name I keep an eye on for 2021.
Curtis Wilkerson joining us. What do you think is going to happen with his basketball season? You think you were going to see a full season? You think they'll go conference only? When are they going to start?
Oh, yeah, it's so tough to say. Every day it seems like there's a little bit more and more momentum towards trying to develop some kind of bubble. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that would look like. I do think that there's a decent window there with a lot of schools kind of ending their on-campus semester the week of Thanksgiving. So you have from that time period into early January where you could really get started, and with not, a lot of kids not being on campus and things like that, it almost kind of sets itself up nicely for a bubble. So I don't know if you throw, maybe some non-conference pods in and get, 6 to 8 teams together and do something like that. Mm-hmm. Or if you just wait until January and try to go conference only. It's still, Isaiah Joe or not, this is an exciting team. Everybody's pretty pumped about what Eric Musselman's doing. They're looking like they're going to be pretty good. I just want as many games as possible. I don't care how they do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought that with Isaiah Joe there, that probably the best team in 6 years, maybe quarter century. I still think they could have that distinction. They can only play so many guys. I think they just have a lot of weapons. I really think Moses Moody is in store for some big things. Connor Vanover too. There's a clip that everybody was kind of raving on with Connor Vanover that the Arkansas basketball Twitter account put out, that was basically him blocking a shot and then, coming down on the other end and hitting a three. And I've seen him make an inside move and a bucket, come down on the other end, block a shot, knock down a three, come back on the other end, pull down a rebound. I've seen those kind of sequences from him before in practice. So I think that he has a shot to be a really good player. I'm wondering how many minutes you think that we're going to see from a guy like Connor Vanover.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be really interested to see how that shakes out. I mean, you look at him and you think that he's probably a guy who you could count on for 20, 25 minutes, but with that frame, 7'3", kind of a lumbering frame, you wouldn't expect him to be a guy that could play 30 plus minutes night in, night out. But if he's producing at a high level, you've got to find a way to keep him on the floor. And, I saw that clip too, and that was impressive. And, another thing that stands out to me is just how much different he looks physically. I mean, he's put on 15 to 20 pounds, and you can really tell the difference in him and, the red-white game, a little less than a year ago. So he looks impressive. I'm really anxious. I still think that he's going to be a guy who winds up taking that starting position at the 5, 20, 25 minutes per game. But if he can, have the wind and the legs to stretch that out, that might be a good thing for the Hogs.
Yep. All right, Curtis. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for jumping on.
Hey, anytime. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Curtis Wilkerson. Again, you can read all Curtis's stuff at HawgSports. Again, HawgSports.com right now is 50% off. 50% off for your first year at HawgSports.com, or you can sign up for $1 for your first month. Two great options. The 50% off deal breaks down to 15 cents a day, $1.03 a week. Okay, there's no promo code. Just go to the site. You'll see where it says 50% off. You'll see join at the top right. Either one of those will work. Take you to the same spot. Go sign up today. We promise you'll be glad you did. Take the dollar option or take the 50% off option. We're going to get to your questions here in a second. We're going to jump into the questions from the Razor's Edge first, and if we have time, we'll go into some of the Facebook questions as well. Plenty of ways to watch and listen. Always tune on Facebook Live. Follow the page if you haven't done so already. Also available on YouTube. Throw us a thumbs up on both of those channels. Subscribe to the YouTube page and hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Be sure to share the content with somebody else you think might like it. All that helps the algorithm, helps boost our channel up. Also, say something nice about us on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to have a review from you there, as well as a 5-star rating. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Questions. Who's got a question? Okay. Anon5886917_scout. This is somebody without a name. You can go on if you email me or DM me Anon, then I'll tell you how to get your name fixed. Any tickets for opposing fans? I would think that there's going to be a limited number of tickets for opposing fans, but very limited, maybe in the family type range. I don't know, though. I know that there's going to be probably limited situation for media, for traveling media. Hog Nation 9 says, Trey, I want to hear your thoughts on the weakest position group and the strongest for this season. Nothing future related. So the weakest position group right now, I think, is linebacker. I just don't know that they have a lot of depth. There's just a lot of questions. I've said yesterday or Thursday, they need Levi Draper to be the guy that he was recruited, the number 5 ranked inside linebacker prospect in the country. Need Bumper Pool to have an all-SEC season. Need Grant Morgan to get everything he's got out of his 5'11", 220. And need a guy like Andrew Parker to emerge. D.D. Edwards, somebody like that needs to. Zach Zymos is a guy that I didn't mention the other day, and Zymos is a guy with a lot of athletic ability too. But I think that's probably the overall weakest group on the team. Past that, you might say tight end because of depth on the offensive side. So I might say tight end because of depth. Because it's Hudson Henry, Blake Kern's a senior, former walk-on, and then Sutherland is a true freshman. So you're a little thin at that spot. Strongest groups, I'm going to say wide receiver, mainly with the starters. It's probably not the deepest group, but strongest, I would say it's strongest just because of those 3 starting guys. Strongest on defense, I would probably go with, I think it has a chance to be the secondary or the defensive line. If I'm going to be more specific, maybe I'll say defensive end, where you have Julius Coates, Dorian Gerald, Matteo Soli, Eric Gregory, Zach Williams. You got some good, intriguing players there. And then you got Jashad Stewart, Blaine Toll. I'm forgetting somebody. But anyway, I think maybe that group, defensive ends, wide receivers for strongest, linebackers, tight ends for weakest. Hog Nation 9 says, how different does practice feel from the previous staff? So I've only been to the one practice so far, but it does feel more organized. I can remember from my first experience at a Chad Morris practice in the spring, he's got a microphone on, it's going over the loudspeaker, it's not working right. It just felt chaotic. And I know they were trying to go fast and all that stuff, but it just felt like chaos. It got better, but the first practice I remember thinking, nobody seems to know where they're going. I don't get that. It seems more controlled under Pittman. So, strap-on pads Tuesday. The fastest swimmer, any opinions on Darren Turner and Miles Slusher? I didn't really get a look at either of those guys. I'll try to get a better look at those guys today at practice. I think we were able to go in at about 4:15 today. So try to get a better look at those guys today. Birmingham Hogs says, has Bumper Pool had a good offseason and put on weight, stepped up into a leadership role? How big of a step forward do you expect him to take with Scooter gone? It feels like he has in terms of the leadership type of stuff. Weight, he looks about the same to me. I don't know that he's like put on a whole bunch of weight or anything, but Bumper's got talent. He can be a really good linebacker for Arkansas. But as far as putting on weight, I haven't seen a whole lot of change in him, to be honest. Hawk Savage says, who's a more exciting player to see in a system that really benefits them, Traylon Burks or Moses Moody? That's a toss-up. I'm really excited about watching Moses Moody. Some of the clips that we've seen so far from practice. People say he's not that explosive. He's looked pretty darn explosive. Burks, here's the deal with Burks, right? So Arkansas receivers combined for, like the three starters last year combined for like 90 catches, 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, something like that, right? There were 2 guys at LSU who put up those numbers. Kobe Hamilton put up those numbers one year. The 2 guys at LSU put up better numbers. I mean, they had like 18 touchdowns. But Burks, to me, alone, in the right circumstance, and it may – I think Burks is capable of putting up that type of numbers. I really do, that all 3 of those guys put up. I mean, you played 5 different quarterbacks last year, so if they have some consistency at quarterback, the offensive line is better, the system is better, all of those things, then, Traylon Burks could have a monster year. Mountain Hog says, how does this team look if either Boyd or Burks goes down? I don't say that, Mountain Hog. I don't even want to keep reading this. Will we still have enough depth to be competitive if those 2 guys go down? Is there a position group that has a significant drop-off from the first string to the second? It still remains to be seen on the backup running backs. Rakeem Boyd says, he's got really high praise for Traylon Smith and has said a lot of positive things about Amonte Spivey. But it's going to be a drop-off, I think, if you lose. But you got to have 3 really healthy backs. Quality backs you feel good about at running back. Burks probably in a better position to handle things at wide receiver, but it's not going to be good. I don't like that question, Mountain Hog. I don't want to think about stuff like that. Houston Nutburner says, off the top of your heads, list the NFL players on the roster. All right. Traylon Burks, Trey Knox, Noah Gatlin, Ricky Stromberg, possibly Myron Cunningham. Some of these are, like reaches for me. I'm just like projecting. I mean, possibly Felipe Franks, I guess. Rakeem Boyd, possibly Hudson Henry. There's a lot of possibilities, okay? I think there's some guys with some promise. They're real young, but we'll see. And that's kind of spread out. Obviously those guys aren't all going pro the same year. Defensively, I mean, there's a possibility for Coates and Gerald both. It's a possibility for Jonathan Marshall. Maybe Soley, maybe Zach Williams. I mean, they're all so young, it's hard to say right now, but they all have talent. Bumper Pool is a possibility. I think Monteric Brown. And then they're so young in a lot of spots. Jalen Catalon's young, but, there's a lot of promise with him. Jerry Jacobs possibly. Who knows? there's a lot of possibilities. So it's hard to say, but Arkansas has not been producing in the NFL like they should. That's no secret. Hog Nation 9 says, do you feel not 100% confident about any of our commits sticking with their commitments? Any dream offers they are waiting on and will bounce if they get? There's been some talk like the A.J. Green, if he were to get a running back offer from Oklahoma, they've offered him as a defensive back. But he said he's 110% committed. That's hard to say. I mean, that's probably, Hog Nation, a better question for Danny West. We'll try to get Danny on maybe Thursday. Orchard Blessing says, thoughts on TJ Hammond's working almost exclusively with the wide receivers and how does he look? I just saw him over there catching a couple passes. I mean, he's done that before. Under Morris, I believe, 1 year, maybe it was Bielema, but they worked him because they knew he could play running back. They worked him almost exclusively, I think, one spring at wide receiver just to get him shored up there. Have you put eyes on Josh Oglesby? Yes, very quick. The speed translates so far, but he hasn't been in pads. How does he carry pads at 5'8", 174 pounds? That remains to be seen. And your thoughts on what he might be able to bring to the table? I mean, a guy with 10.44 legitimate, that's fully automatic timer type of laser speed. You can do a lot, I would assume, possibly in return game, end around. I mean, they'll probably find something for the guy, I would think. Does it look like we have an answer? This is also from Orchard Blessings. Does it look like we also have an answer to the deep threat this year? I've held my breath the last few years every time an opposing quarterback has had much time in the pocket. Do we have more solid in the secondary of this staff? I do not think we have been gunned athletically as much as we've seen on the field the past few years. I still think Monteric Brown has a ton of ability. He's got good size. He's a good tackler, good speed, good hips, good instincts, good attitude. So I think that he's a guy that's got potential at the next level. So Jerry Jacobs, I think, would be a guy that's encouraging too. And then, you've got some other, Gregory Brooks Jr., who's working at the slot, along with Kari Johnson, the freshman, working at the slot, the nickel spot. Devin Bush. You've got some intriguing young guys. Ladarius Bishop is said to be the fastest defensive player on the team also, according to the last staff. So you'd like to think that he wouldn't get toasted. Excluding quarterback, which position groups do you feel make the biggest leap in performance this season? One for offense and one for defense, please. Biggest jump, I'll say defensive line, just because that's what the coaches have been saying. That's the group that's been surprising them the most. So I'll say defensive line. Plus you get Dorian Gerald back. You add Julius Coates. You add Xavier Kelly. Everybody else is a year older. Those young freshmen. Last year, Zach Williams, Matteo Soli. Eric Gregory's a guy that would have played for him last year too, but he had the high ankle sprain, had the surgery. So I'll say defensive line. And biggest leap in performance on the offensive side of the ball. Offensive line. Up front. I think changing things out, getting those guys bigger. Myron Cunningham's 320. He was 385 last year. 285 last year. So that's a pretty significant jump in weight. So I'll say offensive line, if I can't name quarterback, offensive line and defensive line. That's two good areas that you want to be improved in, right? Razorback 501 says any player switching position to help out with linebacker depth. Eric Thomas was a recruit listed as a defensive end recruit up until they came out with the roster. Now he's listed as a linebacker. So him, but I don't know of anybody else. And Eldo Hog says, in your opinion, who is the leading tackler on defense this year? I think Bumper Poole, and I think due to name recognition, Bumper also has a really good chance to be all SEC. If they, win a few games, which I think there's a good chance. The first 4 games, I think there's 2 opportunities for them to win a game and stop the streak. But you can't just suck on defense and get a bunch of guys all SEC. It doesn't happen that way. All right, let's flip over to some Facebook questions here. Cody Andrews says, is Burks going to be our true number 1 wide receiver? I believe so. I think there's plenty of opportunities for Trey Knox as well. Todd Willis says, don't the schools have the option to tell a kid that they are granted another year of eligibility but not at Arkansas? As we know, the scholarship is good for 1 year. So most schools promise 4 years, but Wisconsin did the same. Wisconsin, when they came out and said all the spring sports players have another year of eligibility, Barry Alvarez says, not here you don't. Basically, they can't afford it. And I think you'll run into a lot of schools that run into some kind of problem, especially if you allow over 85. So, David McDaniel says Woods is just as good, maybe. Justin Eric Cunningham says is predicting 1-0 start against Georgia. I mean, Georgia could possibly be rusty. They got a new quarterback coming in. I wouldn't predict that. The line is -24 for Georgia. Daniel Passport says, I'm hoping we don't need the punters so much next season. Yeah. Jared Eubank says, how do you think the O-line will be this year? I think they'll be much improved. I think a few things will play a role in that. First of all, splitting those wide receivers out so far, you're going to create a lot of natural one-on-one. Okay, so the quarterback is a lot of times is going to know what he's got, and he's going to know where he's going with the ball. Okay, a lot of times. And that's not just in the RPO game, where you're just reading the conflict defender. But there's a lot of times in other stuff that they'll know that. And so you're going to get the ball out faster. They actually did improve in sacks allowed last year versus 2018. But under Pittman, the 3 years he was here, they led the SEC in fewest sacks allowed. Part of that was part of the way that they ran the offense and stuff too. Frank O says, Frank O Hunt says, what are the chances we play football this year? Football at all? I think is really strong. Really strong. Jeff Smith says, any kids from Texarkana going to get any playing time this year? Who's your all-time Texarkana Razorback? Kids from Texarkana. Who's on the roster from Texarkana? All-time Texarkana Razorback would be Ryan Mallett. You didn't specify Arkansas or Texas side, so I'm going to go Ryan Mallett, all-time Texarkana Razorback. Jeffrey Green says, how good is Felipe Franks looking? I mean, I've just seen him throw in drills, but the ball really comes off his arm. He throws really strong. Morgan Couch says, you expecting Jalen Catalon to play this year? I would expect Jalen Catalon to start. He has suffered a little bit of a setback in camp, but he'll be back out there towards the end of camp, and I expect him to start at one of the safety spots. Justin Eric Cunningham says, how's Jerry Jacobs looking? Looking good. I mean, physically, he looks like bowed up type of guy. I mentioned on Thursday's show that, he reminds me a little bit just the way he's put together, like Chris Houston, former Razorback. Aaron Stalling says, Trey Biddy, Arkansas is going to be all right, and quit fearing that schedule. Everybody got to come game ready. I'm not fearing the schedule. I just think Arkansas got screwed. They did. They did get screwed. I mean, but you go to Arkansas to play in the SEC, to play tough opponents. I mean, if you look at it one way, you lose the opportunities against three teams that you would expect to win. It's hard to say that now after what's happened the last couple of years, but you'd expect generally to win those games. And you basically replace Notre Dame with, say, Georgia and Florida on top of that. So, in a way, you've added Florida, and in terms of the number of tough opponents. But I mean, like there's no way Alabama would ever be tagged with having to play. What Alabama get? Kentucky and Missouri, something like that. I mean, there's no way that they would have given them Florida and Georgia. Stephen Wilson says, what's Mike Woods look like since he is a leader? The last I talked to Mike Woods, he had 3 touchdowns on one day, all from Felipe Franks. Stephen Wilson, off team, I'm subscription after show. Subscribing after show. Appreciate you, Stephen Wilson. Be like Stephen Wilson. Go to HawgSports.com, HAWG, sports.com. No promo code or anything. Just sign up and you will get the deal, 50% off. It's a limited time offer, so make sure you go get it done today. Mark Douglas says, want to see a defense make some 4th down stops? Yep. Still shaking my head at how Western Kentucky had zero respect for our defense last year, going for it and succeeding over and over. That was just a train wreck. The whole defense sucked last year. Arkansas gave up more points last year than any time in the last 10 years. I answered a lot of these questions in the last show. Billy Wayne Carter says, we'll get some fresh stuff for you guys today because I'll be out at practice. Let's look at the schedule real quick. So today, media will get there at 4:15. We'll have opportunity to watch stuff, and then 7 o'clock roughly, we'll have Zoom meeting with some student athletes. I'm hoping we'll get Felipe Franks today. That would be nice. We haven't had him yet. Tuesday is the first day of full pads. We'll arrive at 3:35 for practice, And then we'll also have 620 with Pittman and some student athletes. So Wednesday, they practice, but we don't have any availability whatsoever. And they got us on Friday, the 28th, which is the first scrimmage. Okay? So they will scrimmage on the 28th. And then afterwards, we'll get Pittman, student athletes at approximately 7:10. So they got us working late on a Friday. Glad to have it. Bring it on. I work late on Saturdays anyway throughout the season. All right. JT Cunningham says, will we make a change at center? Are they going to try to correct slow shotgun? I think they will. From what I've seen, Ricky Stromberg is, mostly working at the first center, but I have seen very limited. So it's going to be Stromberg, Ty Clary, also possibly Luke Jones, who's been working at guard. Bo Limmer's capable of playing center, but he's been working at guard also. And Shane Clennon has also snapped the ball some. But I think there's a really strong shot. Whoever wins, they're going to start whoever wins this battle, and then they'll branch off. So if Ricky Stromberg proves to be the best player among, whoever else is working at center, Ty Clary, Luke Jones, Bo Limmer, whoever else, Shane Clennon, then he will start at center. Okay, and then they'll, from there, go to the guards. So they want to make sure that center is a really strong position with their best interior offensive lineman. Jordan Manchester says there was a lot of optimism leading into last year. I don't know about that. What's different this year is that we should believe that your analysis this fall. I'm hearing a lot of the same things. Last year, Jordan, and I was wrong, I'll give that, but I don't know about optimism, but what I was saying was that you watch a young team grow, develop, get better, and that's a healthy way to look at last season. I don't remember picking Arkansas to win a ton of games. But I think they've got better coaches. And more experienced players. A lot of these guys are a year older. So I'm going to give most people the benefit of the doubt, generally. But I think there's a lot of reasons to be more encouraged this year. And I'm not predicting a lot of wins either. I don't think that people should take what I'm saying right now as optimism, because I'm not thinking they're going to have a winning record or anything this year. But I do think that there are 4 games on the schedule that they have a legitimate chance at winning. I think they can beat Tennessee. I think they can beat Missouri, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. And it may not feel like a whole lot if they come out of that with 2 wins, but it's a different type of schedule. And if they win 2 SEC games, I would think that they would probably have won those 3 other games, Joshua Shiver Stray, who's your favorite Razorback football defensive player of all time? Steve Atwater, Kenoy Kennedy, safeties. Martrell Spate. I think those are some good ones. Maybe I'll pick Spate. Even though we only had him really 1 year. He played 2, but really 1 year. Do you think we will play much no huddle? Yes, exclusively, Rick. They will play no huddle. They're going to go extremely fast. Hopefully. Heard it before. Christopher Stein says Nick's on the O-line is from Texarkana. Yes, and he is also working at center some. Thank you, Christopher. Steve Welton. Someone said Hogs will be 0-10 this year. I think their first realistic chance at a win comes October 3rd against Mississippi State. That's week 2. Mississippi State is actually on the ESPN FPI ranked lower than Arkansas is, but it is at Mississippi State. But at the same time, there's not going to be as many cowbells in the stands. Jordan Manchester says that's too easy. We hear the same things every fall. Seems like we analyze a bubble and can't evaluate and compare our team to other teams' talent. This gets hopes up and unrealistic expectation. Every time Trey says so-and-so looks good, we have to ask compared to what? That's fair. Compared to last year. How about that? It doesn't take a rocket scientist, Jordan, to figure that out, that I'm talking about compared to last year. I don't think I've given any indication that Arkansas that you should be super optimistic this year. That's you misinterpreting or hearing what you want to hear. Okay? That's your fault. Compared to last year, nobody's saying they're going to win a championship, which is what I said last year too. Nobody's saying Arkansas is going to win a championship or that you should think or expect anything like that or a winning season. Just to make sure you don't misconstrue that. But you've said the same thing here twice. Is there a third post where you say the same thing? You know, and I'll say this also. Last year, and it's happened some this year too, granted, but last year and the year before were the lowest amount of exposure that we've ever had for Razorback football practices from a media standpoint. Okay, this year probably a little different because of coronavirus. But the last 2 years, and we also had a head coach who said less than anybody ever has. He had the fewest amount of media opportunities and said never answered anybody's questions. So it was difficult to get a real good handle on it. Yeah. Appreciate you chiming in, Jordan Manchester. Jeffrey Green says, where's Nix in the rotation on the O-line? He was working third-team center when I saw, but it wasn't really the same thing. Stephen Wilson says they quit. Absolutely they quit. And that's something that gets totally underestimated. You can't tell me the way that Arkansas played last year against Texas A&M and Kentucky, 2 games that they probably should have won, means anything when you compare to how they played against Western Kentucky. I mean, look at how much crappier they were. Auburn, Mississippi State. Look how much, that's called letting go of the rope and quitting. And that's one reason you've heard me talk so much about how much it seems like the players are behind this coaching staff and how much behind they are with Sam Pittman, because I don't feel like the talent on this roster is representative of 4-20. It's not. So Jordan Manchester. That's what I got for you. Cole Trim says, haven't seen Hillis on the practice videos. What's got him coaching? QB, what's he got him coaching? Yeah, Peyton Hillis isn't coaching. Joshua Shiver says, what's the deal with Trey Knox? We're expecting to see him back out this week. Whatever it is, it's not a big deal. But he wasn't out there on Wednesday. Kevin Idle Drummond says, how different will the offense look this year in your opinion? Well, hopefully it'll look a hell of a lot different. Faster, more yards, more production, more points. But hopefully in almost every category it'll look different. Daniel Passmore says, you didn't, Trey. I know, I didn't. Thank you. People love to turn it around. Back in 2018, I was literally the only media person in the state of Arkansas who said Arkansas wasn't going to a bowl game that first year. The only one. Stephen Wilson said our talent level is not 2-10 bad. Absolutely. Anything going on with Trey Knox? I answered that a second ago. Stephen Wilson says better coaches. Yes. Stephen Wilson says we lost 4 games by 7 points last year. Cletus Pre says, no, you guys say the same optimistic stuff every year. You're wrong, Cletus. I would challenge you to go back and look. Stephen Wilson says as bad as, Cletus, go back and look. And don't loop me in with everybody. You can't just say, all media people are just the same. And, you guys say the same thing every year. Go back and look. And I guarantee you when I saw it wasn't going anywhere, I let everybody know what I thought. Stephen Wilson says as bad as defense are Brian, Billy Ray Smith, Tony Bua, Caleb Miller. Yeah, those are all good ones. Remember Houston Nutt transfer of power 8-0 turnaround. I don't know about that. A lot of people's favorites. Morris said a lot. Yes, he did. Probably more than anything else. Joey Patrick says there's no doubt we will be better. We have coaches now. We've always had good enough talent. Yes. Good enough. Well, let's say, even if they're bad on talent, they're not a disaster. That's what I've always said. Last 2 years were an utter disaster. So the talent on this team to me, maybe even if it's bad compared to the rest of the SEC, it's not an utter disaster It doesn't deserve the results they were seeing last year. Alan Tyson says, how does this season impact kids on the West Coast mentality? Kids watching Bama and Auburn play instead of you. I don't know. I can't get in their head, but I think it probably helps SEC in terms of recruiting to actually have people out on the field playing. Nathan Espinoza says the last 2 years were a joke. Got more faith in this staff. I think a lot of people feel that way. Tim Allen says, I believe we will beat one big team this year. You never know. You can surprise somebody. I mean, as bad as like the 92 team was, they went to Knoxville and beat them. They were the number 3 ranked team in the country. And they went down there and won. Stuff like that happens. That ball don't bounce straight up and down, Houston Nut. All right. Randy Reese says, are they sleeping on Knox? I think if you can get Knox and Burks the ball, you're going to be in good shape. If you can get those guys the ball, they're going to make plays for you. Where did the preseason polls have Arkansas? I mean, nobody's mentioning Arkansas with a preseason poll. Stephen Wilson says, I was at Colorado State Meltdown. I was too. I was down there on the field when they were coming through the tunnel, and everybody was like, what just happened? Screaming mad. Let's see what else we got. Mike Cormier says, you spelled it out in your walk and talks. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Paul Cunningham says, as crazy as it sounds with this schedule, I believe we can get 6 wins. Call me a dreamer. You are a dreamer. You are a dreamer. Joel W. McLean says, we got talent. We will surprise a lot this year. I think they will surprise some people this year, but I don't know that like Paul, I don't know that it's going to be 6 wins or anything like that, but I do think that they will surprise some people. I've said I think they'll get 2 wins in the SEC. Okay, so people can call me optimistic or whatever. I don't know why 2 wins is like getting you hyped up and optimistic. Last question. Kevin Venable says, what is the linebacker rotation going to look like this season? I think it's going to be, it's going to be Bumper, obviously, possibly Hayden Henry if they have a 3, if a third linebacker. And then the other spot I think is up for grabs between probably Levi Draper and Grant Morgan. I think Zach Zymos has a chance to play for him some this year. I've had people tell me in the past all he needed was to add weight, and he's done that. So he's done that. Of course, everybody, I want to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen, Facebook Live and YouTube. Be sure to follow the page on Facebook Live. Throw us a thumbs up, a frown face, smiley face, whatever you want. Add comments below. All that stuff helps the algorithm, boost up our channel. But follow the page if you haven't done so already. Also available on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to that channel. Hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. And throw us a like if you like the content and interact with the video on YouTube also. Apple Podcasts, throw us a 5-star review. And also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Sign up right now. Now's the time to sign up. 50% off. HawgSports.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. All right, guys. I want to thank Curtis Wilkerson for joining us. I want to thank my people on the Razor's Edge and you guys on Facebook as well for your questions. And we'll be back with you guys on Thursday and we'll have 2 practices under our belt then, so should have a little bit more information. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.